A man witnessed a murder on the balcony and was so frightened that he quickly took out his phone to call the police. But just then, the lights suddenly came on. It turned out that his wife, who had woken up, was drinking water in the kitchen. The sudden light caught the attention of the killer downstairs. John hurriedly turned off the light switch, but the killer had already noticed the movement. After his wife went back to bed, John quietly lay on the balcony to check and was surprised to find that the killer was counting the floors of his building. John picked up the phone to continue calling the police, but because of the earlier fright, his phone was broken. At this time, the killer was walking towards his building. John quickly picked up a baseball bat and guarded the door. As a result, after waiting for a long time, the killer still did not appear. Meanwhile, the woman who had fallen in a pool of blood was not yet dead. She made a call to the police, but was kicked aside by the killer who had returned. Under the gaze of a dog, the woman was finally bludgeoned to death by the killer. The next day, a large number of police officers arrived at the scene. The officer in charge of the case was Detective Jack. When John passed the crime scene on his way to work, he stood in the killer's position and looked towards his own home. John wanted to call the police, but was afraid of retaliation from the killer. So, he decided not to get involved and tried to avoid trouble. However, all day long, he was uneasy and the image of the killer from last night kept popping up in his mind. When he returned home from work, John watched the news and felt full of guilt. Just then, the phone at home suddenly rang, but there was no sound when he answered. The phone rang like this several times. John was puzzled. Suddenly, he found that his family's puppy was missing. So, he and his wife went downstairs to look for the puppy, but he did not know that the killer was secretly watching them at this time. The next day, when John went to work, he felt like he was being followed. Scared, he quickened his pace, ready to escape. Just then, Detective Jack approached him, asked about the case, and took out photos from the scene, asking if he could recognize the suspicious person in the photos. John didn't dare to answer because he saw the motorcyclist on the street corner staring at him. Just as John was hesitating, Jack's phone rang. His subordinate informed him that the murderer had been caught and said that the murderer had committed suicide by poisoning himself while escaping. The police found the murder weapon in the killer's home. Even so, the experienced Jack still had doubts. He felt that the case might be someone deliberately framing another, but he didn't have enough evidence. John saw a photo online and found that the killer was not the person he saw. At this time, the doorbell at home suddenly rang. It turned out to be the female neighbor living downstairs. After entering, she took out her phone and told John that the person in the photo was not the killer. The female neighbor then said that on that night, not only did John see the incident, but she also witnessed everything. However, in order to avoid trouble, John pretended not to know. At this point, the woman said a sentence. "Have you received phone calls that repeatedly dial but don't say anything?" Hearing this, John was so frightened that he immediately pushed the woman out because he was worried that the killer would come for revenge. However, when the woman was about to go home, she met that demon in the elevator.